probably heard somebody in your life say you need to process your emotions. But sometimes it seems like everyone is saying that, but no one really knows what it means or how to actually do it. So you do all the things, but ask, why can't I just get past this? None of these things seem to work. So, what the heck is processing our emotions? And how do we actually do it? Emotional processing is what happens when you allow yourself to fully feel an emotion, stay grounded enough to handle it, make sense of what it means, and then respond in a healthier way. So over time, it has less control over you, and you become more steady and flexible in how you handle life and those emotions in the future. Let me name two traps that trip almost everyone up in getting in the way of real emotional processing. They become the primary stumbling blocks because they interrupt our emotions and often make you feel better temporarily, but only in the short run. But don't sell your birthright for a mess of pottage, so to speak. Play the long game when it comes to emotions and mental health instead of falling into these traps. The first trap is avoidance. This looks like staying busy, pushing your feelings down, distracting yourself until it goes quiet, telling yourself you're fine before you've actually checked in. And our culture is really good at teaching us to do this. We reward people to push through, who don't let things show. But here's the problem. When you consistently push away difficult feelings before you've actually engaged with it, it doesn't go away. It goes underground. And underground feelings have a way of surfacing sideways as irritability or physical tension, as a vague heaviness you can't quite explain, as overreaction to things that seem minor. Think about a beach ball you're trying to hold underwater. You can do it, but it takes constant effort. And the moment your attention goes somewhere else, it pops back up. That's avoidance. The effort it takes to keep things down is itself exhausting. And the feeling is still there, just waiting. And the second trap is rumination. Rumination disguises itself as processing. Internally, we think it sounds like processing. It feels like processing, but it isn't. It's an imposter. Rumination is when you replay the situation, thoughts, or feelings in a loop. You go over what was said, what you should have said, what it means, what it says about you, over and over. It feels like you're working through something, but you're actually just re-triggering the distress without moving through it. Here's a simple way to tell the difference. Genuine reflection leads somewhere. You think about something, you get some clarity, and you're able to move forward, even if it's just slightly. Rumination circles. You end up in the same place you started, just more tired and more activated. Rumination is one of the clearest ways we know of to take a hard feeling and make it worse, to take a bad week and turn it into a bad month. So if avoidance makes things worse and replaying it makes things worse, what actually helps? Well, emotional processing does. And the rest of this video is about how to actually do that. And to organize it, I want to give you a framework that maps onto exactly what the evidence shows works. It's called ACT or ACTT. Four elements that together cover the full landscape, what actually moves a person through difficult emotional experience. Not a rigid sequence to follow, although sometimes the sequence can be helpful. It's more like four instruments in a symphony that need to play together for the music to resolve. It's not a linear process. Real emotional processing is messy. You might start with one element, shift to another, and loop back. What you're building over time is a set of skills that gradually become more natural, like learning to drive. It's kind of clunky at first. Eventually, it becomes second nature. The first step of ACT is to acknowledge and accept. The first element sounds deceptively simple. Actually, notice your feelings and let yourself feel it without immediately fighting it. I know that sounds obvious, but most of us, when a difficult feeling comes up, move to management almost immediately. We reason with ourselves, we minimize it, we tell ourselves we shouldn't feel this way. We try to skip ahead to being okay. And the problem is, you can't work through something you haven't first faced. Think about it this way. Imagine your check engine light comes on in your car and you put a piece of tape over it. Light stops bothering you, but the problem is still there and probably getting worse. Difficult emotions are information. They're your inner life signaling that something matters, something feels wrong, that something needs your attention. So the first move is just this: pause and actually notice what is there. And here's something that makes a genuine difference: getting specific about what you're actually feeling. Not just, I'm stressed or I'm upset. What flavor is it? Is it anger or embarrassment or fear? Hurt mixed with disappointment. The more precisely you can name what you're feeling, the easier it becomes to work with it. When you put a precise label on an emotion, something settles. It's the difference between being overwhelmed by a general storm of bad feeling and being able to say, this is grief, this is resentment, this is shame. Once you know what you're dealing with, you have somewhere to start. A client came in once saying she was just really stressed about her marriage. We spent the first part of our session slowing down and getting specific. What came out wasn't stress at all. It was profound loneliness. She'd been living alongside her husband for years and feeling completely unseen. Stressed had been the word she used to keep it manageable. Lonely was the word that finally gave her something to actually work with. The second part is to accept and stop fighting the feeling itself. Accept doesn't mean that you're glad that it's there. It doesn't mean that the situation is okay. It means you stop spending energy arguing with the fact that you feel this way or that things have happened the way that they have. Because trying to eliminate feelings before you've actually engaged with it almost always makes it louder. Have you ever told an anxious person to just calm down? How did that go? John 8:32 says, "The truth shall set you free." Not the managed version of the truth, the actual truth of what is present. And that leads us to the C, which is to change your body. When you're emotionally activated, your body is in a different state. Your heart rate goes up, your muscles are tighter, your thinking narrows. And the part of your brain that does your best thinking, the part that can see the big picture, consider different perspectives, access your values, and make thoughtful decisions, that part is genuinely less accessible when your body is in a high alert state. This isn't a metaphor, it's how your nervous system actually works. A flooded body and clear, flexible thinking don't exist very well. What this means practically is that trying to think your way through an emotional problem while you're still in the middle of a stress response is like trying to thread a needle while shaking a person's hand. It's working against itself. So before you try to think through it, calm your body first. Two things have the strongest evidence behind them to do this. The first is breathing, specifically slowing your breath down and making your exhale longer than your inhale. Try 4 counts in and 6 to 8 counts out. Do that for 5 minutes and your body will genuinely shift. You're activating your body's own calming system, and you can do it anywhere: in the car after a hard conversation, in the bathroom at work, in bed at 2 a.m. when your mind won't stop. The second thing is movement and or relaxation. Genuine physical movement, especially anything that gets your heart rate up, a run, a fast walk, vigorous exercise. This is one of the most well-supported interventions in all of emotional health research. Or noticing tension and then releasing it. Using a body scan or progressive relaxation sequence can be helpful to practice this. I'll link an example in the description. Movement and relaxation reliably reduce anxiety and improve mood. Not because it distracts you, because it's genuinely changing what's happening in your body and brain. I had a client who came in after a blowout argument with his teenage son. He was so activated, he could barely sit still. He did 5 minutes of breathing before we said another word about the situation. By the end of that 5 minutes, his shoulders had come down, his voice had slowed, and he said, "Okay, I can actually think about this now." That's the shift we're going for. Sometimes changing your body also means allowing your body's natural emotional response to take its course rather than trying to suppress it. Things like shaking or crying. In John 11:35, it says that Jesus wept. The most whole person who ever lived didn't bypass his body's response to grief. He let it move through him. He didn't rush past it, reason himself out of it, or manage the appearance of it. He was present in it fully before he acted. Even when moments later he would raise Lazarus, the subject of his grief, from the dead. That's what it looks like to honor the body's part in emotional experience. The third step is to think well. Once your body is settled enough that your best thinking is back online, now the mind gets to do its work. And here's the key word in this step: flexible. The goal is not to think positively. It's not to silver lining everything or rationalize away things that actually hurt. The goal is accurate, honest, flexible thinking. And that requires first interrupting something that almost everyone does, especially when they're hurting, and that's replaying. We've already talked about rumination, but here inside Think Well, the question becomes, can I tell the difference between genuine reflection and unproductive looping? Genuine reflection produces movement, some clarity, some shift. Looping produces more of the same feeling, often intensified. If you've thought about something 50 times and you're in exactly the same emotional place, that's not processing, that's a loop. So notice it, name it, deliberately redirect. Once you've interrupted the loop, the useful work of the mind can begin. When you're hurt or afraid or angry, the stories we tell ourselves tend to run toward extremes. This always happens. I'll never be able to. This means everything is broken. The question that cuts through this is, what I'm telling myself actually true, or am I filling in the gaps with assumptions? What am I leaving out of this picture? What would I say to someone I genuinely cared about if they were thinking this way? That one is worth sitting with for a while. Most of us apply a standard to ourselves in pain that we would never apply to a friend. We'd tell a friend, one hard conversation doesn't define the whole relationship. We'd tell ourselves, see, this is what always happens. There's real value in catching that gap and closing it. A client going through a divorce came in convinced she was fundamentally unlovable. The ending of her marriage was proof of that. When we looked at what she was telling herself, she could see it. She was taking one painful event and building a permanent conclusion from it. That conclusion wasn't true. She'd been so deep in that loop that it started to feel true. Getting outside of that loop long enough to examine the thought was what broke it open. Now, the last step of ACT is to take action. Insight is valuable, awareness matters. Understanding your patterns is super useful, but none of that on its own reliably changes how you feel or who you're becoming. Behavior changes how you feel. What you do consistently over time shapes your emotional life more than anything else. Taking action has 3 dimensions. The first is staying with it rather than avoiding it. Instead of organizing your life around avoiding the difficult thing, you move toward it deliberately in amounts that you can handle. Not all at once, gradually. If the hard conversation keeps not happening and your resentment keeps building, the action is having the conversation, starting with the smallest version that you can manage. If grief has made you avoid everything connected to who you lost, the action might be looking at one photo for 5 minutes and letting yourself truly feel it. This is how fear and avoidance loosen their grip. Not through insight alone, through gentle, consistent approach. The second is doing things that matter to you even when you don't feel like it. This is especially important in depression. Depression lies to you about motivation. It tells you that you'll engage with life once you feel better, but it works the other way around. Engagement comes first and the feeling follows. You don't wait to feel like going for a walk. You go, and then you feel slightly more like yourself. And the third is the relational piece. You are not designed to do this alone. The most important action you can take in the middle of hard emotional territory is reaching out to someone safe. Someone who will be genuinely present with you without trying to fix you, minimize what you're feeling, or make it about themselves. Not venting, which often just keeps the loop going, but honest, real contact. Say what's actually true and being actually heard. And I worked with was 8 months into quiet depression after losing his job. He'd stopped going to church, stopped calling his friends, stopped doing most of what had made his life feel like his. He was waiting to feel better before he re-engaged. But waiting was the depression talking. The first thing we worked on wasn't insight, it was behavior. One small action a day that connected him to something he truly valued. Within a few weeks, before he'd done any significant cognitive work, he was starting to feel more like himself again. Behavior came first and the feeling followed. Here is the context that makes it all work: patience. Emotional resolution is almost never a single moment. What you're building is a skill, and skills develop the way all skills do, through repeated practice across different situations and over time. There will be good days and there will be setbacks. That's not failure, that's learning. Finally, let me walk you through what all of this looks like in practice. In a situation I think most people will recognize. So picture this. You're at work and you get critical feedback from your manager. It's delivered in front of your entire team with a tone that felt dismissive and unfair. You sit through the rest of the meeting, you keep your expression even, and you feel something building in your chest you don't have time to deal with right now. You get home and your partner asks how your day was, and you say, fine. You eat dinner, you watch something, and then you just go to bed. But at 1 a.m. in the morning, you're still awake and you're running the scene back. What he said, what the others looked like, what you should have said, why this keeps happening, whether you're just not cut out for this. By 2 p.m., you've mentally rewritten your entire professional identity. Does this sound familiar? Here's what the alternate ACT version of that might look like when someone has built these skills that we've talked about today. You're in the meeting, you feel the heat in your chest, and you just notice it. Instead of immediately managing it away, you just register it. Something's happening. I'll come back to this. That's the beginning of acknowledge and accept. You don't have to feel it all right there. You just don't tape over it. After the meeting, you take a 15-minute walk. Not to think, just to move. Your body is running a stress response, whether you acknowledge it or not. The walk gives it somewhere to go. By the time you're back at your desk, your chest is looser and your thinking is clearer. That's change your body. Done in the middle of a workday. No drama, no ceremony. On the drive home, you let yourself actually name what you're carrying. Not, I'm stressed. Something more specific. Maybe you're angry. And underneath that anger, if you're honest, you're hurt because you worked hard on that project. And the way the feedback was delivered felt like that work wasn't seen or appreciated. That naming, that's the deeper part of acknowledge and accept. These elements aren't a strict sequence. They circle back. And that evening, instead of saying fine, you tell your partner the actual truth. Not a long vent, just what's real. I had a hard day. My manager gave me some feedback in front of the whole team, and it felt really dismissive. I'm still processing it. And your partner says something like, man, that sounds rough. And maybe that's enough. Being heard by an engaged person does something nothing else can fully replicate. That night, you still wake up at 1 a.m. It's just an old habit. But instead of going straight into the replay, you notice you're in a loop. You get up, do 5 minutes of breathing, and then, with your thinking clearer, you ask yourself real questions. Was the feedback actually inaccurate? Or was it that the delivery just stung? When you're honest, you can see it. Some of the feedback was actually fair. Some of it was delivered poorly. Those are two separate things. You don't need to approve of the tone, but you can still learn from the content. That's think well, not toxic positivity, just honest, accurate, flexible thinking from a body that's settled enough to actually do it. Next morning, you send your manager a brief professional message. I'd like to follow up on yesterday's feedback when you have a few minutes. I want to make sure I understood what you're looking for. It's uncomfortable to send, and you do it anyway. That's taking action, moving toward rather than away, doing the thing that discomfort wants you to avoid. It doesn't resolve everything. The relationship with your manager might still need some work, but you slept and you're clear and you're not carrying yesterday into today. The situation is still there, but you're not controlled by it. That's ACT in real life. It's not perfect, not drama-free completely, not a single cathartic moment, just a set of real skills brought to bear on real situations, producing real forward movement. Here's what I want you to take from this. You need to acknowledge and accept what's real, to bring your body along for the process, to think clearly and break the loops, and act on something that moves you toward the life and the relationships you actually want, even when it's uncomfortable. That's ACT. That's what I hope for you. Not to feel less, to move through feelings more freely. If this landed for you, share it with someone who needs it. The printable ACT guide is linked in the description. Print it. Keep it somewhere useful. Subscribe if you want more of this. I'll see you in the next video.